Hello there, very good evening. This is the weekend edition of Primetime News on TV1 for the Newsfirst, where the people come first. I'm Martin Satyanesan. Let's start off with a look at your headlines for this evening.
Vehicle inspection in civilian clothes not allowed. Acting IGP issues instructions. Withdraw the online safety bill immediately. Social media activists demand. 59 civil society and human rights groups issue statement demanding withdrawal of online safety bill. Undemocratic autocracy cannot be allowed in an election year, opposition leader stresses.
On to those stories in detail. The remains of Roshan Kumar Tilaka, who was shot dead by a police sub-inspector in Dampalace, Narambala, was brought to his residence this morning. Acting IGP Deshabandhu Tenakon visited the resident this morning to pay his final respects.
42-year-old Roshan Kumar Tilaka, a father of three and a carpenter from Wattekanda, was reportedly travelling home in his small lorry on the Nigambu-Kurunegala road around 7 p.m. on Thursday when the incident occurred in Dampalace, Naramala. The remains of Roshan Kumar Tilaka was brought to his residence yesterday morning. Acting Inspector General of Police Deshabandhu Tenakon visited the residence this morning to pay his final respects. A compensation of 1 million rupees was provided to the family of the deceased who died in the shooting. The Acting General of Police expressed views on the incident to the media.
All necessary legal measures are followed when taking action against a police officer, just like if the incident occurred at the hands of a civilian. There is no need to intimidate civilians by displaying weapons or creating unnecessary incidents like this. The police serve the vast majority of law-abiding and just citizens in this country. This is unacceptable behavior. Yesterday, I sent a series of instructions to the Sri Lanka police and informed them that no under circumstances should they be asked to stop while travelling on roads dressed in civilian clothes. I have instructed senior police officers to take immediate steps to ensure such incidents never happen again.
State Minister of Mass Media Shantha Bandara paid his final respects to the remains of Roshan Kumar Tilaka.
I condemn the recent shooting incident in Narambala. I have already brought the administrative shortcomings of the Narambala police to the attention of the relevant authorities. I am disappointed for their concerning practices, including the alleged extortion of money from civilians. Despite raising these issues with both the minister and the president, no concrete action has been taken to address them. This disregard for public safety and due process is unacceptable. Today we witness the consequences of such inaction with the senseless loss of an innocent life.
General Secretary of the JVP, Tilvin Silva, said the implementation of the law in Sri Lanka raises serious concerns.
We witnessed this incident as a result of anarchy. The question remains, what will become the consequences? In a desperate attempt to underscore the gravity of this tragedy, the Acting Inspector General of Police offered the family a monetary compensation. But can a human life be truly measured in such terms? Can this mistake ever be truly rectified? What future lies ahead for this family, losing a father and left to raise 3 children alone? We view this shooting as a manifestation of the political disintegration. It exposes the corrupt practices of those who once governed, highlighting how they wielded the police force as a tool for personal gain. This is a toxic environment where law enforcement operated with impunity, disregarding legal boundaries. Certain ministers pressured officials to abandon their legal obligations and comply with their demands. Such blatant threats left officials with no choice. We cannot forget the similar shootout in Waligama just weeks ago, where a police officer tragically lost his life. Yet, even in that instance, the police adhered to protocol. Instead of prioritizing medical care by rushing the injured officer to hospital, the very institution tasked with protecting lives now stands stained by the blood of both civilians and its own officers. Internal discord within the police force further intensifies the crisis. Deshabandhu Tennakon, the Acting Inspector General, must be held responsible for this failure of leadership. The Minister of Public Security cannot continue to evade responsibility. The Sri Lankan police force is meant to serve and protect, not become instruments of fear and injustice.
The Joint Teachers Service Union also expressed their views today.
We are horrified by the recent incident in Naramala. Tiranalas and Deshabandhu Tennakon are exploiting political gain and turning the Sri Lankan police into a gang of thugs. 2 people in civilian clothing approached an innocent young carpenter returning home after work, and one of them opened fire at him. In the face of such senseless violence, we urge Tiranalas and Deshabandhu Tennakon to refrain from politicizing this tragedy and manipulating the Sri Lanka police for their own ends. While we empathize with the police officer who lost his life in the Hikadu incident and acknowledge the 450,000 rupee compensation paid to his family, we demand equal justice for the victim in Naramala.
Newsfirst with the people.
2 draft laws proposed by the government, the Online Safety Bill and the Anti-Terrorism Bill, have faced strong opposition both nationally and internationally. The latest criticism of the Anti-Terrorism Bill comes from the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. The OHCHR points out that the proposed bill could result in serious human rights violations if passed in its current form and urges immediate amendments.
The United Nations Human Rights Office in a statement said that Sri Lanka's anti-terrorism bill, intended to replace the Draconian Prevention of Terrorism Act, has been denounced for perpetuating past human rights violations and failing to uphold international standards. Ravina Shamdasani, spokesperson for the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, stated that the repeal of the PTA should be a turning point for meaningful reform of Sri Lanka's approach to internal security. But this proposed law instead risks perpetuating patterns of violation from the past. The United Nations Human Rights Office said that the bill defines acts of terrorism overly broadly, restricts the scope of judicial guarantees, especially with respect to challenging the lawfulness of detention orders, and curtails the ability of the Human Rights Commission to visit places of detention, among other problematic provisions. It warned that if passed in its current form, the bill would grant excessive powers to the executive to restrict rights with limited or no safeguards against abuse of such powers. The United Nations Human Rights Office urged authorities to revise the bill and bring it fully into line with Sri Lanka's international human rights obligations. The Socialist Youth Union convened a joint media conference today urging the government to immediately withdraw the online safety bill.
Without the roadside fruit vendors' footage of the carpenter shooting, the police likely would have concealed the truth, labeling him a drug dealer targeted in Operation Yuktiya. This revelation exposed through the social media underscores how they impose harsh regulations on social media to protect their corrupt system and control dissent.
මේ වගේ අත්නෝමතික ඒකාධිපති නීතියක් ගෙනල්ලා තියෙනවා.
මේ පනත කතා බහටවත්
This bill shouldn't even be mentioned, let alone debated. The Human Rights Commission's strong opposition yesterday to this legislation clearly mirrors our own. What good is a government that fails to protect basic needs like health, education and food security? We demand they leave our fundamental rights untouched.
අපිට වියදමක් නැතුව රැකලා දෙන්න පුළුවන් අපේ අයිතිවාසිකම් ටිකට අත තියන්න ලෑස්ති වෙන්න එපා.
මේ පනත පරාජය කිරීම සඳහා
Even if we take to the streets against this bill, the person who would be re-elected would not be a single person, but an entity. It is important to symbolize the people's struggle. Therefore, we are requesting everyone to come to the streets yet again.
සියලු දෙනාට කියනවා අපි ආයෙ පාරට බහිමු.
මේක මැතිවරණ වසරක්.
This is an election year. Usually the candidates would control the mainstream media in a way that is most favorable to them and conduct their individual political campaigns. Now, because of the growing pull of social media, they are unable to have full control over the narrative, which has led these politicians to introduce the online safety bill.
ඒගොල්ලෝ මේක අනිවාර්යෙන් මේක ගෙනල්ලා තියෙනවා.
දැන් දන්නවා රටේ ජනමතය
They are aware that the perception is against them. They are unable to go to a village or an electorate in the upcoming election. A group of MPs who are unable to visit their electorate in an orderly manner is now attempting to censor the use of social media by regulating the social media conduct. Do these MPs have a conscience? I do not think so. But if they want to step into their villages or electorates again, they should vote against any legislation that aims to unduly regulate or prohibit the people's right to use social media or express their views.
විරුද්ධව ඡන්දය ලබා දිය යුතුයි.
The Citizens of People's Struggle movement expressed views on the online safety bill and people's rights.
ආණ්ඩුව ත්‍රස්තවාදය වැළැක්වීමේ පනත ගෙනල්ලා ආණ්ඩුව ඔන්ලයින් පනත ගෙනල්ලා
The government is trying to intimidate people by introducing the Anti-Terrorism Act and Online Safety Bill. We saw how a police officer in civilian clothes shot and murdered a youth in broad daylight in Narammala. The footage of the incident was posted on social media through a bystander's social media account. It is because of that the main news channels picked up on this and followed up on the matter. If there was no young generation with social media at their fingertips, the police would have tried to control the narrative by saying that they chased the vehicle. It contained drugs or bombs, and the police opened fire as defense when they resisted arrest. And we will use that as his cause of death. Because of social media, the police could not find a way out of this. That is why the government is now working to create a police state, suppress the media and silence the people by suppressing socialism. Should we just sit and watch this happen?
ඒකට අපි බලා සිටිය යුතුද?
The Movement for People's Council emphasizes that the democratic rights of the people must be protected.
අපි පැහැදිලිව ඔබට කියනවා
If the governments misuse their power to oppress the people, they will ultimately face the consequences of their actions. Therefore, we as the Movement of People's Council urge the government to prioritize the preservation and protection of democratic rights.
ඒ එකතුව විදියට අපි බල කර සිටින්න කැමැති.
එක පැත්තකින් රාජ්‍ය භීෂණයක් මේ
We can see how the government is suppressing its citizens. They are promoting such suppressing to combat the opposition for the online safety bill.
යෑමේ අවශ්‍යතාවය ඇති වෙනවා.
මානවිකම් ගණන් ගන්න ඕනේ නැහැ කියලා කියනකොට
When human rights are disregarded, arguments against their importance emerge. Therefore, it's crucial to recognize and uphold the importance of human rights, both for individual well-being and the stability of society as a whole. The sub-inspector who opened fire isn't the only responsible for the incident.
අර හෙඩි තියපු කෙනා විතරක් නෙවෙයි.
Sri Lanka's proposed online safety bill is facing mounting pressure from civil society and human rights groups who warn it could severely curtail free speech and harm democratic values. The Committee to Protect Journalists joined 58 organizations to issue a letter to Minister of Public Security Tirunelveli calling for the withdrawal of the online safety bill.
The Committee to Protect Journalists joined 58 organizations in calling on Minister of Public Security Tirunelveli to withdraw the proposed online safety bill and conduct sustained multi-stakeholder consultations, including with civil society and human rights experts. The bill, set to be tabled in Parliament this month, has drawn sharp criticism for its overly broad definitions of offences, lack of independent oversight and potential for abuse by the executive. The Committee to Protect Journalists argued that false statements and ill-will definitions could arbitrarily restrict speech and empower censorship. It said the bill grants excessive power to a president-appointed commission, raising concerns about political manipulation. It said, demanding user identification and proactive monitoring pose threats to privacy and security. It added that stifling online expression could damage Sri Lanka's growing digital economy and employment opportunities. The groups urged the government to withdraw the bill and engage in meaningful consultations with all stakeholders, including human rights experts, to develop a nuanced approach to online content regulation. They emphasized the need for safeguards that respect fundamental rights, follow international law, and prioritize youth empowerment.
The Jatika Jana Balavega's lawyers argue that the anti-terrorism bill and the online safety bill must be considered together.
What is the urgency driving Ranil Wickremesinghe to introduce the online safety bill? Critics argue that its primary aim to control the public narrative and hinder the free circulation of opinions. This concern arises alongside the proposed anti-terrorism bill, which raises separate concerns about curbing civil rights and freedom of expression through intimidation. We urge the public to examine these proposed legislations in conjunction as they appear to work in parallel to restrict freedom. The timing also raises eyebrows, coinciding with crucial election year and a presidential election that Ranil Wickremesinghe, lacking a strong popular mandate, may fear losing.
Opposition leader Sajid Premadasa called for the immediate withdrawal of the proposed online safety bill.
The proposed bill violates the fundamental rights of our people. In a letter to the Speaker of Parliament yesterday, I urged that the bill be reformed with significant amendments before being debated. We firmly believe that under the guise of online safety bill, the bill attempts to legalize dictatorship and infringe upon the human rights of all Sri Lankans. In light of the upcoming election and the pressing need for public discussion, I propose that this bill be immediately removed from next week's Parliament agenda.
Newsfirst, main sponsor.
Reach beyond boundaries with Edlocate. Explore education across 6 destinations under one roof. Explore education across 6 destinations: England, Canada, Ireland, New Zealand, Malaysia and Vietnam under one roof on 27 January from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Taj Samudra. Speak directly with university representatives. Scholarships available. Calling 077 177 0361.
A new day and hope dawned on the villages of Unapana in Padiyathalava, Ampara. After years of grappling with an acute water crisis, they finally witnessed a solution. Relief and joy filled the air as Gammadha delivered a clean drinking water filter system to Unapana, promising an end to their long thirst.
Over 200 families call Unapana home, and for too long, their daily lives have been marred by the struggle for clean drinking water. Under the scorching sun, they've toiled in the fields, only to return to quench their thirst with water far from safe. This dire situation isn't a recent development. For generations, Unapana residents have relied on inadequate water sources. Forced to walk for kilometers in search of water, these villagers ended up with brackish, barely consumable water. This desperate struggle for even a meager sip has sadly cost some their lives. Even today, the village grapples with the aftermath, with around 20 residents suffering from kidney diseases, a tragic consequence of years of relying on unsafe water. The villagers, disappointed that their pleas fell on deaf ears, determined to seek help, approached Gammadha. The Tennyson and Vinitha Rodrigo Trust Fund joined hands with Gammadha to provide the people of Unapana with a water purification system. And the project that got underway with the technical support of the Sri Lankan Navy was unveiled this morning. General Secretary of Gammadda Prasanna Athukorala, representatives of the Tennyson and Minitha Rodrigo Trust Fund, the Padiyathalava Divisional Secretary B.V. Sudarshan Gunasena, Padiyathalava Police OIC Roshan S. Bandulasena, Padiyathalava Mahavali Divisional Officer N.K. Vijay Singha, Lieutenant Commander D.I.P. Kumara and T.M. Dharmadasa attended the event.
For years, this village has seen politicians and officials lay foundation stones for various projects, promising change that never materialized. But this, the water purification system, is now a reality. The kidney disease has plagued our elders, with my beloved Guru succumbing to it. We won't forget this day, not just for the water, but for the promise it holds.
A performance by the village children also added joy to the event.
The villagers know how difficult it is to travel kilometers every day to find drinking water in villages like this. So we are very thankful to Gammadda for solving such a problem and providing facilities to them. We are also thankful to the Navy. We are happy to be involved in this project.
Gammadda, made in Sri Lanka.
Up next is Action TV.
Concerns have arisen regarding the Forest Conservation Department's handling of the Bakmitiawa Timbrigola Reserve, particularly their lack of action against unauthorized paddy fields cultivated within its boundaries. This raises questions about whether their approach prioritizes hierarchy over conservation. A field survey conducted 2 years ago revealed a 40-acre farmland owned by a former provincial council member and his wife flourishing within the reserve. Despite Divisional Secretary of Pothuwil notifying all respondents, no action has been taken. The Divisional Secretary draws attention to a serious fact that this farmland is being nurtured within the parameters of the Timbrigola Forest Reserve. This inaction is even more troubling considering plans are in place to address the forceful and unlawful occupation of over 2,800 acres of forest reserves and government property as per the Forest Conservation Ordinance. That is after the recommendation of the Ampara District Land Users Committee, which suggested to distribute the said land among its adverse possessors. A serious portion of this land overlaps with the Bakmitiawa Timbrigola Reserve, and the construction of public roads for convenience access further indicates a coordinated land scam. 16 years ago, 2 circulars issued by the Commissioner General of Land outlined the transparent process for Sri Lankan citizens to acquire state-owned land. These directives also establish the maximum landholding limit and aim to curb illegal occupation of public property. Any state-owned land, including forest reserves and sanctuaries, can only have the residential boundaries falling under a specific Grama Nilidhari division. These officials wield absolute authority to prevent forceful land occupation within their jurisdiction. It is imperative to ask why the Grama Nilidharis of Pothuwil turned a blind eye to these violations that took place in broad daylight. If we fail to hold accountable both the individuals who exploit the law and the administrative officials who enable them, our precious forest reserves and sanctuaries will soon be nothing more than map markings. Following the recommendations of the Ampara Land Users Association would only accelerate the destruction of these vital ecosystems. Prime Minister, this is for your attention.
The official meeting between President Ranil Wickremesinghe and Prime Minister of Nepal Pushpa Kamal Dahal took place today in Kampala, Uganda, in conjunction with the Non-Aligned Movement Summit.
The leaders engaged in extensive discussions on promoting the cultural and religious relations that have existed between the two countries since the past, emphasizing the potential for promoting tourism. With the aim of expanding political relations, a proposal was made to facilitate an exchange program for the MPs to study parliamentary affairs of both countries. Simultaneously, Indian Minister of External Affairs S. Jaishankar met with President Ranil Wickremesinghe for discussions. On a post on X following the meeting, the Indian Minister of of External Affairs said, quote, pleased to call on Sri Lankan President Ranil Wickremesinghe on the sidelines of the Non-Alignment Movement Summit in Kampala. Appreciate his continued guidance for the advancement of our bilateral initiatives. India's commitment is reflected in our neighbourhood first and Sagar policy, unquote.
Red Sea crisis.
Shifting your attention to international news, US fighter jet struck Iranian-backed Houthi rebel sites for the sixth time in as many days.
Foreign media reported that US fighter jets struck Iranian-backed Houthi rebel sites for the sixth time yesterday, taking out 3 anti-ship missiles in Yemen that were prepared to fire. According to US officials, the strikes were carried out by FA-18 aircraft of the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower aircraft carrier, and they resembled similar US attacks on Houthi launchers that have been occurring almost daily this week. In a statement, the US Central Command said the United States determined they presented an imminent threat to merchant vessels and the US Navy ships in the region, and so struck them in self-defense. Meanwhile, the Saudi Foreign Minister has called on Tehran for collective efforts to bring peace to the region amid the war in Gaza and attacks in the Red Sea. Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud emphasized the crucial need for de-escalation and conveyed a message to all regional actors. He said, quote, we all need to work towards de-escalation. The region is already in turmoil. Our message to everyone, including to our neighbors in Iran, is that we need to work towards de-escalation, end quote.
Meanwhile, 4 senior members of the Iran security forces have been killed in a suspected airstrike on the Syrian capital.
Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard blamed Israel for the attack, which it said killed 4 military advisors as well as a number of Syrian forces. According to foreign media, for years it has carried out strikes on Iranian-linked targets in Syria. Such strikes have intensified since the Israel-Gaza war began, following Hamas's October 7th attacks on Israel. Senior figures among the Revolutionary Guard, a major military, political and economic force in Iran, have been present in Syria since the civil war began there in 2011, helping to support the regime of President Bashar al-Assad against widespread rebellion to his rule. Saturday's attack is understood to have taken place in southwest Damascus, an area home to a military airport, as well as the UN headquarters in Damascus, embassies and restaurants.
Divisions within the Israeli government are deepening after the war. Cabinet Minister Gadi Einscott suggested the key war aim of defeating Hamas is unrealistic and called for elections within months.
A key member of Israel's war cabinet has accused Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of not telling the truth about the military goals in Gaza. Netanyahu has publicly rejected the US push for a future Palestinian state and insisted the offensive would continue until complete victory. But Gadi said those advocating absolute defeat of Hamas were not speaking the truth. The retired general's son was killed fighting in Gaza as well. He also said that Netanyahu shared sharp and clear responsibility for failing to protect his country on the 7th of October and urged a fresh election, saying there was no trust in Israel's current leadership.
Colombo Scope Way of the Forest was held today in Colombo.
Colombo Scope is a contemporary art festival and creative platform for interdisciplinary dialogue in Sri Lanka. The 8th edition of the festival is shaped with over 40 Sri Lankan and international artists and collectives. Colombo Scope 2024 is curated by Hitman Gurun, Sirasa Rajbandari and Sarkar Protek with artist-director Natasha Ginwala. The multi-chapter exhibition at Colombo Scope 2024 and accompanying events are an intricate study of our eroding ecological histories of lost environmental wisdoms, monstrous development agendas and ghosts of extraction. Colombo Scope Way of the Forest will be held from 19 to 28 January 2024 across several venues in Colombo.
Sri Lankan photographer Ashan Marasinghe has captured the internet's heart with his hilarious photo of a leopard striking a rather uncharacteristic pose. His image has landed him a final spot in the funny nature category of the prestigious Nature Photographic Contest 2023 in Spain. From that, we bring to a close this edition of Primetime News on TV1. For details of the stories and much more, simply log on to our website www.newsfirst.lk. For the News First, where the people come first, I'm Martin Satyanes, and you take care and good night.